Today we're talking about whether or not it's important to learn with a teacher who is a native speaker, and whether or not it's important to practice speaking with native speakers. But I want to start with something that I said on Facebook the other day. I said saying that you only want to practice speaking with native speakers is like saying that you only want to practice playing football if you can practice with Cristiano Ronaldo. I also followed it with a comment explaining a lot more about what I meant. However, reading your comments, I realized that many of you did not understand what I was really trying to say. Some people thought I was saying that native speakers are the best people to practice with. Some people thought I was saying that you shouldn't practice with native speakers. Others thought I was saying that Cristiano Ronaldo is the best football player. And none of those are what I was actually trying to say. What I was trying to say is just that every day people tell me that they don't have anyone to practice speaking with, when the truth is that they have tons of people who they can practice speaking with. They just don't want to practice with them because they only want to practice speaking if they can practice with a native speaker. So again, it's just like having lots of other people who want to practice playing football with you, but you say that there isn't anyone because you only want to practice if you can practice with Ronaldo. My point was this: limiting yourself to only practicing with native speakers generally isn't a good idea, especially if there aren't very many of them where you live. That's all that I was trying to say in that post. But now let's talk about whether or not I think it's important to learn and practice with native speakers. And the first thing that we need to understand is what a native speaker is. A native speaker is just someone who grew up speaking the language as their first language. It's not important what country they're from, what color their skin is, or what other languages they speak. The only thing that matters is that they started learning the language as a very young child, probably before they were 5, 6, or 7 years old. After that age, you can learn to speak as well as a native speaker, but you'll never be one, because again, being a native speaker just means that it is your first language. The next thing we need to understand is that although they do sometimes happen at the same time, there is a very big difference between learning and practicing. Learning is about information going into your brain. Practicing is about using the language that you have already learned. So again, we actually have two questions that we need to answer separately. One, is it important to learn with a teacher who is a native speaker? And two, is it important to practice with native speakers? To answer the first question, the only real difference between a teacher who is a native speaker and a teacher who is a non-native speaker is usually going to be their accent. And I want to be very clear, it is possible for a non-native speaker to develop an accent that is almost identical to the accent of a native speaker. However, it's very uncommon. And honestly, if you are learning English as an adult, you're probably never going to have a native-sounding accent. And that's okay. For most people, accent really isn't very important. And I think a lot of you really don't understand how difficult it is to develop an accent in a new language. It takes hundreds of hours of work. You're not going to suddenly develop a Polish accent just because you spent 60 hours learning with an English teacher from Poland. So for 95% of you, your teacher's accent really doesn't matter. What matters is that they can speak English at about the same level as a native speaker, they pronounce words correctly, and they are a good teacher. And none of those things require them to be a native speaker. So when you're looking for a teacher, I really don't think that the first question should be, is this person a native speaker? Instead, I think it should be, is this person an experienced teacher who also has a high level of English, and do I like their teaching style and personality? In fact, when I needed an English teacher for my niece and nephew in Thailand, I had to choose between a native speaker from the UK and a non-native speaker from Cameroon. And I chose the non-native speaker. Yes, he had a very strong Cameroonian accent, but he was clearly an experienced teacher and he was really good with children. So in my opinion, there are lots of things that are much more important than your teacher's accent. And the second question was whether it's important to practice with native speakers. And for this, I have two answers, because it really depends whether we are talking about speaking or listening. If you want to be able to understand native speakers, then yes, you need to practice listening to native speakers. However, you don't need real people to do that, because you can practice listening with movies, TV shows, podcasts, and YouTube videos. Now, speaking. Speaking practice is about you using the language that you already know again and again so that you can remember it and use it more easily in the future. Because it's about what you do, not what the other person does, no, it usually doesn't matter whether they are a native speaker. Plus, when you practice with other English learners, you can do things like role-play situations and repeat the same conversations again and again. And those are two of the best things that you can do if you want to improve your speaking. Those are also two things that most native English speakers are not going to want to do, because they are not English learners. Just like how Ronaldo probably doesn't want to practice the same skills that you want to practice, most native English speakers probably don't want to practice having conversations with you. If you have native speakers who you can practice with, and you enjoy practicing with them, keep doing that. That's great. I am not telling you to stop doing that. All I want is for everyone to understand that you have people who you can practice speaking with. They just might not be native speakers. And again, that really doesn't matter, because speaking practice is about what you do with your mouth, not who the other person is.